Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stu and the Nun. You got Stu here tonight. Nun is tied up probably on a boat somewhere or just getting on the shore. So got me just tonight here, episode 360. As you can see, we have our guest on tonight. I'm very glad and honored to welcome Mr. Les Rubin here to the show. Les is a professional accountant, CPA, entrepreneur, and real estate magnate. Can I say that? I don't know what makes a real estate magnate, but definitely a real estate developer. And Les, I want to thank you and welcome you to our show tonight here on this Thursday.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here and talk about some of my favorite topics.
Absolutely. I'm waiting to get educated. I have, I like to feel like I know a few things, and I work in cybersecurity, but economics is not one of them. I'm probably a shade tree economist. I kind of just follow things and use common sense, but I definitely don't know what's all the magic behind all the numbers or how things happen. So really glad to have you here. And before we get going, maybe give her, I've kind of told people a little bit about, some of the titles you've had, but maybe give our listeners and viewers a little bit of a background of who you are and what kind of brought you here.
Well, I was born and raised in Atlanta and attended the school at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And there I majored in accounting. And my early career was as a CPA. I spent 7.5 years with Arthur Anderson and Company back many years ago, and then a corporate controller for a few years. And then I started my own real estate development company. I have been developing commercial real estate for over 50 years now. And I still do that as my day job, but I think it's been overtaken some by my devotion to economics and trying to solve some of the problems that this country has.
So you're a math geek, right? You definitely know that, not only just the math side, but just the economics of how money moves in and out in a capitalist society and just how markets react and that kind of stuff. Are you a big investor, like in the market and that kind of thing?
I do, and I have over the years. I'm sort of out of the market at the moment. I do understand numbers and I can read. And that's what scares me. So, what can I tell you?
Well, you got it better going. So you have this website, mainstreeteconomics.org. What's behind this? Why did you create it? And what are you trying to accomplish with this site?
Well, I've been involved with economic education for over 40 years. I've worked very closely with the school system. Back in the 80s, we developed something called Enterprise Village. Very involved with the school system doing that. And I've always been interested in economics, even though I didn't major in it. I took many courses in it when I could. And so over the years, I've watched what's happening in the country. And in the most recent 5 or 6 years, I've started to free up some of my time from my daily business affairs. We have other people handling a lot of the work in our company. So I'm a part-time partner in that. And that's allowed me to actually start Main Street Economics. And the more I got into what I was trying to accomplish, the more I realized how serious the problems were in this country. And so it's kind of morphed from just trying to provide basic economics and educate people that were interested into a crusade to try and educate the public before our ship crashes. And I believe that it will if we keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, that's what it kind of looks at. When I went through it, I mean, the name I think fits perfectly because it seems like you're trying to bring to the common everyday man, right? Main Street um, terminology and language is just simpler to understand. It's not all voodoo and magic and things happening. It's like it's pretty straightforward to understand. Kind of you make so much comes in, so much goes out, and you either have balanced budget and you have excess that you can have some assets and savings, or you're in debt. And it seems like that's kind of what you're doing. Because, one thing you have a lot of pictures up there, which I like. That makes it easier for an old instrument like me. But when I look at for example, you have this one, the growth of the U.S. Treasury debt. It makes it very clear that starting about 1940, it started going, and look, excuse me, about 1997, it really started. Or 1987, the 1991, it really started ballooning up. And I mean, it makes it very simple that look, we've not always been this way. Someone that's only been on this earth for 20, 30, 40 years must think this country's always been in debt, but in reality, it hasn't been.
Well, I'm a layman in economics. I'm not an economist, but I have a pretty good understanding of it. And the whole idea of the website is layman to layman. I'm trying to reach the average person on the street that doesn't understand some of the long analyses that you'll get from the economist. One of the things that I often allude to is that the economists are preaching to the choir, and the choir is not singing to the congregation. We need to get to the people on Main Street talking at a level that nobody's going to read that material. Is not going to educate the folks on Main Street. So I'm trying to bring it down to where I understand it and I can communicate it to other people that are not economists, because the masses really have to understand this problem or this country's in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree. I mean, people stick their head in the sand or just watch the nightly news and believe whatever they get in this, whatever they hear in a snippet, however it's spun, depending on which media outlet they watch. Uh, if that's all they do, I mean, I've been a blogger since 2005. That's how this whole show came about. Was from my time blogging when I was deployed and everything like that. And a lot of people just want to really know what was going on in combat down in Afghanistan and different places. They didn't trust what a Geraldo Rivera or someone else was reporting from. They wanted to hear the ground truth. They wanted to learn for themselves. And I think it seems like as I think people have gotten more that way with the media becoming, unfortunately, not the journalist anymore, but a whole bunch of opinionists. Um, they're really having, people want to really know what the real deal is. But when it comes to the economy, people watch the stock market, and they, like we've seen over the last couple of weeks, it go up and down, and they hear whatever someone wants to tell them. I mean, they either spend time and dig into it and understand it, or they just believe whatever they hear, or they hear what their broker tells them, and they just go with that. But kind of walking through life ignorant when it comes to numbers in our economy, whether it's on a
When you get to the news, you get to the news, it's so slanted and so opinionated. It's not always news, and they cherry pick the facts, and so it's losing or has lost its credibility to an awful lot of folks on Main Street. They don't know what to believe. You hear this, you hear that, and you hear both sides, and the truth is always somewhere in the middle, probably. But uh, you just don't know what the facts are, and that's what I'm trying to do is simply present the facts to people so that they understand what the situation is And most importantly, they understand how serious our financial problem is in this country. I mean, the word existential is overused, but if we continue on the course we are on, we will crash into the iceberg. The pamphlet I just wrote was called Our Ship of State, the USS Titanic. And the reason I wrote it, it's a short pamphlet and it's available free on our website. It's only 9 pages long, but it presents in a pretty concise, easy to understand way exactly what our situation is and what we have to do to fix it. Uh, just I can give you a brief recap of the numbers if you would like.
Yeah, if you
The
could kind of give maybe some high levels of what someone just tuning in or listening for a little bit tonight can hear to kind of things to clue in on, right? Things to look for.
Well, the first thing you need to know is the interest-bearing debt of this country is now $37 trillion. Um, that number, it isn't quite 37 today, and the only reason it's limited is because we have a debt ceiling limitation that they haven't passed the increase in the debt ceiling, but it's going to be over 37 trillion as soon as they pass it, the increase in the debt ceiling, and they must pass it or we can't borrow money. The second number is $130 trillion you see up on the screen. That's the interest-bearing debt and the unfunded obligations of Social Security and Medicare. That number is enormous. It's in the 70, 80 trillion dollars is what the government says it is, and many economists projected it much higher than that. So I've used the government's own projection and added up the numbers, and the total liabilities is $130 trillion. I mean, the number's so big nobody can understand what that means.
Yeah.
It, it's $1 million per taxpayer. It's almost $400,000 for every single person in this country. And so when you think about that, and then you look at the projections, the $37 trillion today is going to be at least $60 trillion in 10 years. And that's not my number, that's the government's number. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, does these projections for 10 years and 30 years. And it's going to be $60 trillion. Well, that's an optimistic projection because it doesn't account for any of the things, new programs, war, recession, and even the rescission program that they're doing in Congress right now, and the rescission and reconciliation program today, where they want to extend the tax cuts. They're extending the tax cuts, which increases that number significantly, and they're going to have a few offsets, but not nearly enough. So they're going to add between $4 and $5 trillion over the next 10 years to the projection of 60 trillion. At some point, that bubble is going to burst. And I don't know when. Nobody can tell you exactly when people are going to lose confidence. But in order for us to stay afloat, last year we had to sell $10 trillion of new government bonds. Now, about 8 trillion of that was paying off maturing debt, and 2 trillion was covering the deficits. And we have deficits of 2 trillion or more as far as the eye can see.
Right.
So those numbers are mind-boggling, and they will eventually lead to the downfall of this country. The serious crisis will eventually occur when we can't sell our debt at reasonable prices anymore, and the interest rates will balloon. If people stop being willing to buy our debt, then we have no way to pay our bills.
Right.
And so we sell $10 trillion of debt to keep afloat. Last year, in 10 years, that number is going to be 20 trillion. And the markets are already starting to worry about what is our financial credibility?
Right.
How long can we go with it? That's a Ponzi scheme. And that was the name of a book I wrote last
It
year.
is. It is definitely. I say. Speaking of that, it was a book you wrote. You have it up on. It's on Amazon. Is this your first book you've written, or just
No,
before?
it's actually the second one. The first one was Why You Should Give a Damn About Economics. It was basically a primer on economics for laymen. And in 100 pages, I go through macro and microeconomics for people that are willing to sit down and learn the basics. This is the second book, and I co authored it with economist Dan Mitchell. And it basically is three sections. The first section just gives you the raw data and explains why I think we have a problem. And the Ponzi scheme, as many people probably already know, is you have to keep borrowing more money to pay off the old debts and the old investors. And that's what we're doing because we have no source of income to pay off the old debts other than to borrow more money. That is a Ponzi scheme. Uh, and so we're moving along trying to figure out exactly when that's going to burst, when that bubble is going to burst. The second part of the book gets into an analysis of countries that have fared well, done well economically, and those that have not. And we explain the policies of each of those countries, why they did well and why they did not do well. I mean, it's basic economic theory, but it's demonstrable in the real world by looking at the countries that have done well. Switzerland is one that's done very well. Venezuela is one that's done terrible. They went from a prosperous country in the late 90s to bankrupt,
Mm-hmm.
gross poverty down there now, and it's the economic policies they followed, the socialist policies that they followed that have ruined that country. Uh, so we go through all of that in the second section, and then we draw conclusions from that. And then the last section is, okay, how do we fix the problem? And so we go through the big problem areas: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, uh, the tax structure. Uh, and so we actually delve into suggested solutions on what do we need to do to fix the problem. But
So
the fundamental problem is nobody reads books. So it's a nice exercise, but unless people read them, it doesn't do any good.
right, right. Well, hopefully, some people are being learning about this tonight. We'll go check it out and grab a copy and educate themselves. I mean, I like I said, I kind of a shade tree economist. I mean, I do some investments. I have this and that, and watch things and just learn from people whenever I can. But when you talked about, you talk about in the third part of the book, what we can do to fix it. Obviously, we talk about the basics, right? Of you bring so much money in and so much goes out, right? That's how I think anyone in America, anyone in the world, right? But especially we'll just talk of America that is trying to run their household, right? It's pretty basic. I make this much a month in salary or whatever I have coming in. My all my debts and my bills are this, and it allows me so much. Um, I think that's one thing that upsets and frustrates a lot of Americans is they look at how the government is run, from the economy side and go, the, you know, uh, how can they do that when I'm not allowed to do that? We can't go. You talk about the bubble bursting. I'm assuming it's kind of like when if you were to take that down to a very micro level to an individual household, it'd be like someone borrowing money off of one credit card to pay on another credit card and borrowing off a line of credit to pay off a credit card. Eventually, you run out of places you can borrow from. If I were to break it down simple, is that pretty much what you're warning?
Yeah, in the pamphlet, which I would encourage everybody to go to our website and download it. It's only 9 pages long, and it's a free download. The USS Titanic. In that pamphlet, I did break it down to what the government's P&L would look like if we reduced it down to the size of one family. And here's what that looks like. I'll have to read these numbers. The revenue for you knock off 8 zeros from the government's numbers, and this is what you get. The revenue is 44,000. The individual family revenue is 44,000. If you ran it like the government, your expenses are 77,000. Your loss for the year is $31,000, and your credit card debt is $277,000 for that family. That
That's by
family's bankrupt.
eight
That
zeros
family's
off,
bankrupt.
8 zeros off what the federal government's dealing with. That's what it would look like.
That's the federal government's numbers with 8 zeros locked off. And that family is bankrupt and our country is bankrupt, except we can still borrow money. That family can't borrow money anymore. Their credit is gone. They've got the huge credit card debt and they're losing money every year. They've got no basis to be able to pay off the debt. We are supposedly the credit king of the world, and so people still loan us money. And as long as they loan us money, we can continue to run a loss that we do, and we just cover it with more debt. And so over the last 25 years in particular, the debt has run up from about 5 trillion to 37 trillion. And if you go back to 2000, 2001, that's the pamphlet. If you go back to 2001, when Clinton left office, he was the only president in my lifetime that's ever run a surplus and paid down some of the debt. The only one. When he left office, the ratio of our debt to the total economy, GDP, was about 45%. That number is reasonable and is very manageable in an economy. Today, that number is 125%. That number is not manageable. But the serious problem is that it's going to continue to escalate. It's going to get to over 200% over the next couple of decades. And the only other time we had a debt that was over 100% of in relation to the economy, the GDP, was in World War II. We had huge expenses in borrowing then, and the debt did exceed 100%, which is the danger zone. But that was followed by 2 decades of fiscal responsibility in a rapidly growing economy. Mm-hmm. And the debt ratio fell from over 100% to under 40%. In the 40 to 60% range is not a crisis. You can manage that in relation to the size of the economy. When you get to over 100%, it's a big problem, and that's where we are. And it's headed higher. Unlike the period after World War II when it came down, it's going to be heading significantly higher over the next couple of decades. So that's just not going to work. There will be a crisis someday, and we will lose our ability to borrow money. There's an old saying from one of Ernest Hemingway's books: how did you go bankrupt? Slowly, then all of a sudden. And so right now, there's no problem. We can still borrow money. But then when that all of a sudden comes, it's going to be a stampede and we won't be able to stop it. So my whole point of Main Street economics is to educate people about how serious this problem is and we have to deal with it. And dealing with it will mean pain. I mean, you cannot solve this kind of a problem without some trade-off. It's just not possible.
Is it fair to say that, I mean, a lot of our debt has come from just an overabundance of entitlements and things that the government's given out and all that kind of stuff? And obviously, if you take that away, no one likes everything taken away once they've been given it. That's where the pain's going to come from?
The big deficits are coming from entitlements. That's correct. Yeah. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid combined cost the government over $1 trillion. It's almost $1.5 trillion every single year, but nobody wants to deal with those. There's a quote I'd like to read from a historian. His name was Alexander Tytler. Very few people have heard of him. He was a Scotsman and a historian from 250 years ago. And here's the quote: "A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by dictatorship. That is exactly what's happening in this country today. Exactly. It's the most prophetic quote I've ever heard. He's saying what's happening. The politicians are focused on the next election, not the next generation. And so they want to be elected. I can't blame them for that. They're responding to the public's willingness to vote. So the politicians give out goodies. The voters like the goodies, so they vote for the politicians, and the politician gives out more goodies, and they vote again, and they stay in office forever. And the end result is that we are going to collapse under this loose fiscal policy with deficits that have now reached $2 trillion a year. They've never been $1 trillion a year in the past. Now they're $2 trillion a year. It's just not viable.
No, I mean it's, and when you say it that way, it makes me think, right? This is kind of bred into our society from the youngest ages. You always hear about like some young kid is running for class president, right? There's always this joke or kind of stereotype that someone's running for class president and they're going to promise free pizza every day in the lunchroom and free, there's always this, and free this and you can do that, and that's how they're trying to chum their voters, the students, to vote for me as class president. I'm going to get stuff for you, right? That's literally happens all the time at those ages when ideologies and political opinions are being formed by young people, and this goes all the way up, and we see this now, right? How many times have we seen people vote for someone because, hey, if you vote for me, I'm going to make sure that like you talked about, Social Security, Medicare are hot topics. No politician from any side of any aisle or in the middle want to talk about cutting those or taking them away because they know they'll be crushed in the media and with the voter base as our generations of age and that kind of stuff, right? No one wants to. They're not going to touch that and say, "I'm taking this away from you." You have to
Well,
spend.
I mean, just listen to what Donald Trump says. He says we're not touching Medicare and Medicaid, and listen to the politicians from all walks of life want to give more and more benefits.
Right.
We can't even pay for the ones we have. Most people don't realize that the trust funds for Social Security and Medicare are going to run out in less than 10 years now. When that happens, the law requires, unless they change it, right now the law requires benefit cuts to match the income. And that benefit cut is somewhere between 18 and 23% for Social Security. And I think it's 10 or 11% for Medicare. And that's just Medicare A. Medicare B and D are there is Medicare A is the one you get payroll deduction for, and that's for hospitalization. B and D is optional. It's for your doctors and your drugs. But the fees that they charge people for that insurance cover 26% of the cost. So Medicare B and D run a deficit of about $600 billion every year because the fees they charge don't cover the cost.
Don't cover the cost. Yeah.
So how are we going to balance that? Nobody wants to touch those things, and yet if you don't touch them, we're going to keep cruising on until we hit the iceberg and sink.
We're just
And
kicking
as I
the can.
said, I don't know when, but it will happen. It's a surety that that's going to happen someday if we keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, we're kicking that can down the road, but it's not. We're not picking it up and dealing with it.
The road's getting shorter and shorter.
Good.
That's the fear. We are kicking the can down the road, and it is getting shorter and shorter. And I don't know when the road runs out. I was talking to one senior official in the government, and his view was the politicians will not do anything until we have a major crisis. And he's probably right about that. But my knee-jerk reaction to that was when we have the major crisis, it's going to be too late. When we can't sell our debt, that's the major crisis. There is no good solution. You either default on your bonds or you print money, both of which economically are disastrous.
Right. No, and sadly, that's kind of the way this country is, right? we wait until there's a crisis, and then whether the crisis be something like a COVID and everyone locked down and did that, or someone flies planes into a building, or someone bombs Pearl Harbor, or no matter what it is, then the checkbook opens. Nobody cares, and they just kind of like, we'll deal with it later. We got to make sacrifices. And they do some. We saw that a lot, obviously, in World War II. We'll make sacrifices. We'll do this, but it no one ever wants to be proactive on that because it's a political hot topic, and you're going to get
The only solution that I can come up with is that we have to educate enough of the voting public to understand that we must deal with these problems, and then maybe they will support some meaningful reforms. Now, when I say reforms, I don't mean do away with Social Security. That's not going to happen. But you have to, as long as you protect and the benefits for the truly needy, you have to get to a system that works. You can't take away the benefits from the people that need it. But there's so many other ways that you can reform the system that would work. Medicare, there are solutions, but we keep wanting to do more and more and more, and that's how we got into the hole we're in. Now that we're giving those benefits away, nobody wants to give them up. No politician wants to give them up.
right. Well,
So
you mentioned educate enough of the voters to want to do reforms, but I think it's a second part to that. It's not only educate them, but make them realize that having a little pain and making some sacrifice is more important than allowing this to continue. Because some people may be educated, but they'd be like, nah, I'll be dead in 5, 10, 15 years. Not my problem. I still want my free stuff. It's got to be, yeah, but if you're going to have to suffer some pain. You're not going to get everything that was given to you all the
and and if we don't understand that and we don't reform the systems, we will cruise on, and our kids and grandkids are going to inherit a bankrupt country, and that's unconscionable. It's immoral, in my view, for us to do that to our next generations. If you don't care about yourself, do you care about your kids and your grandkids?
right,
They're not going to have the same benefits we have. They're not going to grow up in the same country we have. Our country won't be recognizable if we let it fail.
right.
There's another quote from one of my favorite old politicians, Everett Dirksen, may he rest in peace. He says, "The politicians see the light once they feel the heat. The only solution is for the public to rise up and say, you've got to fix this, and then the politicians will address it." Is that possible? I I don't know if that's possible or not. To get enough people educated to say, I will sacrifice something now for the long term good of this country. Is that going to happen? I have no earthly idea. But it doesn't seem like it's happening, and my efforts are, are a pittance to what's needed. It's going to take a major national marketing program to get that message across to the people.
And countering a narrative that's pushed by all the most of the media that is and you got to counter that, which is not easy. But
It's hard to even read the media. I mean, I don't. Every time I read it, the first thing is this right or not? Is it true or not? I have no idea anymore.
right. So let me ask you, right? Since President Trump's been back in office, right? We know about Doge, and Elon Musk has been in there, and they've been finding, and they've got the Doge website. Is that possible? Is that just wishful thinking? Is that trying to scoop the water out of the Titanic with a cup, or is that really going to make a difference if they kept that going? I mean, it
Well,
seems
there are some very good benefits to what they're doing, but economically, it's a pittance to what's needed. They're making some good strides. They're working on deregulation. All that's really good stuff. Uh, but if you don't deal with entitlements, you cannot fix the economic problem. And Elon Musk uh, has his way about him, but he's said it very clearly: we're going bankrupt.
right.
That's what I've been saying for 5 years. And he's got a megaphone, and people might hear him. They may not like him, and they may not listen to him, but he's right. He's absolutely right.
So when
And we have to convince our administration of that so that they will realize we have to do something about it. They're the ones that should be leading the band. But as I said, politicians are not going to do that unless they have public support.
right. So when we see things like the cutting of USAID right away, and then the forthcoming cutting of Department of Education, yeah, yes, they spend a lot of money and they cost a lot of money. Like I said, in the greater scheme of things, when you add those 8 zeros back on, they probably don't make much of a difference. But by cutting some of those agencies and everything goes along with them, salaries, real estate, all that kind of stuff, does that not help cut a little bit of the entitlement drain and recover some of that?
It helps. Every little bit helps. But in terms of the big picture, it's a pittance to the dollars needed. Now, what it is doing is bringing light to the subject of some of the stupid things that we do in government. And you see all these crazy grants and things that they do. They're not billions of dollars necessarily, but it underscores the stupidity. Who's getting rich off of all that stupid stuff? I mean, the corruption is rampant, and the cronyism is rampant,
Yeah.
and it's hard to get that out of the system. That's the way
Yeah.
the system works.
Well, whether you're giving billions to Ukraine that has no audit trail, or you're spending $200,000 on a DEI musical in Colombia, or you know hundreds of $1,000s to see if shrimp are gay or whatever, right? All these stupid.
It's bringing light. It is bringing light to the subject. It's making people understand that we're squandering money, and somebody's getting rich from that. I don't know who it is. There's no way you would do some of the stupid things that they're doing, uh, and for no reason other than if they got money in the checkbook and they got to spend it. So they spend it on stupid stuff. I don't know why they do that sort of thing, but at least it's bringing light to it. It is focusing on cutting down the size of government. In our pamphlet, the Titanic pamphlet at the end, I suggest four things that I think need to be done, and I can recap those for you now. The first thing I wanted to see done is term limits.
Yes.
I,
Oh,
I think I think a lot of people would support that, and it would have at least some bearing on the fact that people would start to look at the long term instead of the next election. As I said before, the politicians are focused on the next election, not the next generation. If we have term limits, maybe that would curtail to some degree. The second thing is devolve government, and by that I mean just make it smaller. If you go back to the Constitution, the founding fathers knew that if we grew too large of a government, it would lead to tyranny and loss of freedom. And that is exactly what's happening.
yeah.
That was the reason they designed the Constitution with a limited federal government. And they spelled out what the federal government's jobs were. And in Amendment 10, they said if it's not in the federal government's purview, then it belongs to the states or the people. They were very clear
Yeah.
about that. That's not what we have today. We have a massive bureaucracy, and all the things that should be at the state level or the individual city or individual level, even, are done in the federal government. The bureaucracy is trying to control our lives. So, devolving government back toward, I don't think we'll ever get all the way back to what they had in the Constitution, but back towards that, get rid of some of these uh, agencies. Uh, Javier Milei did it in Argentina, and he's had great success so far. It remains to be seen. He's only been at it about a year and a half, but he's had tremendous results by balancing the budget and getting rid of agencies. We need to do some of that here, but we can't get it through Congress. The third thing is reform entitlements. It's a touchy subject because nobody wants to give up anything. The only way we can get people to support title reform is for them to understand there is no choice. It must be done. If it isn't done, the the benefits are going to get cut automatically. Or when we get to that day, if Congress says no, I'm not going to cut benefits, that just means we have to borrow more money. So we have to reform entitlements. And the big three are Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and there's a host of others.
Right.
And then the last one is taxation. Our tax code is a horrible mess. It's 75,000 unintelligible pages filled with cronyism and special interests, and it does not serve the people well at all. It's not a pro growth tax system. We need to, President Carter, for whatever his strengths and weaknesses were, once said, we need to put a match to the tax code and start over. And he was right. And it's only gotten worse in the 40 years since he was president. We have to fix it. There are easy, simple tax systems that can be workable. Uh, and I could go into some of my ideas, but the important point is we need to get rid of it and start over.
Do you are you a fan of the flat tax? That's something Herman Cain was pushing when he was running for office.
I'm a fan of that as number two position. My number one position is the fair tax. Now, the fair tax is different than the flat tax, and a lot of people don't even understand what the fair tax is, but it's a tax on consumption instead of income, and it replaces every single tax we have now. As an alternative, one that's maybe a little more practical to do, a flat tax would be a great idea. A huge improvement over what we have now.
So the fair tax, when you say it's based on consumption, definitely interested in that. So it's not so much I'm making this much money. That's your money, you get it. But when you go to buy groceries or go out to eat or whatever it may be, go to Target, do shopping, more of the taxes placed there on the items that you purchase. Is that what?
The, the fair tax actually eliminates every single tax that we have today, and it replaces it with a consumption tax on new products. There's no income tax, there's no corporate tax, there's no death tax, there's no Social Security tax, there's no tax at all. If you have $1,000 gross pay, you get a paycheck of $1,000, no deductions. But
So
now
what
you
you're
have
kind
to pay. You do have to pay a pretty healthy premium on products to cover that. But I think it was like 28% or some number like that. It's not an insignificant number, but and it's made fair by having a prebate where the lower income people get all of their taxes paid back each month.
okay.
So I mean,
So you're not getting taxed on all this other stuff, not property tax, not all these other things, but and
now,
not
this replaces all federal taxes.
federal
The
tax.
local, you probably still have property taxes and state sales taxes and stuff like that.
Which is getting popular, getting rid of. Florida, Mississippi, Kentucky are all. Florida's talking about wanting to get rid of property taxes. Mississippi and Kentucky both just passed laws to
Uh,
get rid
income taxes. I don't know about property taxes.
of.
A lot of states have done away with income taxes, like here in Florida. I'm in Clearwater, Florida.
Right,
Florida doesn't have an income tax.
right.
Uh,
Yeah,
it
DeSantis
had, we,
wants to get rid of a property tax. He's saying once you buy your property, why are you having to keep renting it every year? You own it. Why are you paying property?
I'm not aware of anybody actually eliminating property taxes. It's mostly income taxes.
Yeah. No, he's talking about it. I don't think he's gotten it there, but he's talked about wanting to do it. But
Well, you do have to fund government somehow. I mean,
right.
and the tariff wars that we're into now don't make any sense.
So you're not a
I think
they make sense in how to bring revenue into the government.
well, it's a tax on us. I mean, there. I don't think people understand what a tariff is. If they think that that's not a tax on the individuals, they're just wrong. When you bring these items in, you either pay the tax or you have to buy locally because now the import is so expensive you buy locally. Either way, the price of what you're paying is going to go up. The free trade is the right answer on international commerce. It's the only answer, and that's how we've progressed over the years. Uh, the whole world has progressed as a result of free trade or limited taxation. Uh, the there's no good answer. the people that think that we're getting ripped off because we have a trade deficit don't understand the flip side of that coin. The money that goes out from, we're the biggest consumption country in the world, so we buy more than we sell. So we have a trade deficit. That's not going to go away. Uh, there's no way you can get that imbalance. You might make it smaller with tariffs, but it's not going to get imbalanced. But the flip side of that is that money comes back into this country in the form of investment, purchases, uh, and buying stocks, buying our bonds. And if you look at a diagram of the trade deficit outflow and the investment inflow, it's almost a mirror image. They just about balance. So the balance of payments is neutral. The trade deficit is large, but that's not harmful. The reason our inflation is low is because we buy from the low cost producers in China or Taiwan or Vietnam or wherever it is. You want to pay $30 for an American made shirt, or you want to pay $10 for a Vietnamese made shirt. That's kept inflation low. If we bought all American, inflation would go up. The tariffs are, it's just a mistake. I wrote an op-ed the day after he announced his tariff, and the title of it was Liberation Day: Blunder or Brilliance. Uh, if the tariffs stay, it's a blunder. If it's a negotiation to get to a better system, it might turn out to be brilliant. And I think the jury's out on that. I
Yeah,
have no idea where that's going to end up.
it's been interesting, right? I haven't taken it personally that he is trying to just generate revenue per se for the country or for the government, but more so of the way he's winning them up and down, and he's taking them on, putting out, like he seems to be using them as a negotiation tool, knowing that we're a bigger consumer than just every other country out there, and and
I hope that's what he's doing.
yeah, and it's,
When the market reacted quite negatively
it did,
to his tariffs and some very interesting economic facts that most people don't pay attention to because it's kind of obscure. But when we when normally when our interest rates go up, as they did after he announced it, the value of the dollar goes down. What's happened is just the opposite. No, I said that backwards. The dollar gets stronger when our interest rates go higher.
right?
What actually happened is the dollar got weaker when that's a very odd circumstance of economics that says to me there's some loss of confidence here. People are slowly losing confidence in the United States because our fiscal policies are reckless, and the tariff idea, if it's a negotiation, is one thing, and it may end up great. If it's if it ends up with a trade war amongst all the countries, that's disastrous. We should have learned from the Smoot-Hawley uh, problem in the 1930s when Hoover did that. It was catastrophic. World trade collapsed when they did the big tariffs, and these are just as big potentially.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I saw today that some reports, and I don't know how true they are, that China is definitely now feeling the pain and wanting to talk and negotiate. So I don't know if it was a game of chicken. Maybe we're gonna win out. It seems like it's that the way they were tit tat back and forth, and we raised, they raised, and a couple weeks ago. Maybe now they're feeling the pain. It's coming back. I don't know, but it's
It does feel like a game of chicken, and I'm afraid neither one is going to blink. That's
good.
that's my fear, and that we'll self annihilate each other. It's not good for either party.
Right.
Uh, it's really not a good thing for either party, and I don't know where it's going to end up, but the jury's out in my mind of where that whole thing ends up. I hope it turns up with a reasonable answer at the end.
Would you can just curious? Would you consider yourself a libertarian?
Yes.
Yeah, because
Uh,
I consider myself, and you said all the right things: term limits, 10th Amendment. I mean, you hit on many of the things, right? Smaller government. Um,
I'm a registered independent. I don't, I'm not into the parties. I think they both have serious problems, and we need to educate the public if we're ever going to get anywhere. That's the fundamental thing that I'm focused on, is how do we get the public aware of the problem and the fact that we have to do certain things or we are going to destroy this country. We are literally going to destroy this country.
That's the hardest challenge, right? Is getting them to want to be educated, right? So the whole lead the horse to water. They don't care.
I don't know how to do it. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm trying, but I'm a nobody in this world. We need a massive public education program. The government should do it, but they won't because they don't really understand what I'm saying very well.
well,
I do think the politicians know we have a serious problem, but it goes right back to the same thing. They're working on the next election.
right. Well, like say, like they're never going to vote for term limits, right? That's a big thing. I'm a big believer in too. There's no way they're never going to pass something that limits their ability to have power. Um, it's
And unless the people demand it, and I'm not sure you could ever get them to vote. I don't. A lot of people say they want term limits, but they wait until you try and get a vote on it.
right.
That's not going to. I don't think that's going to happen. I'd like to see it happen.
It would take a major, like you said, a major catastrophe or a major thing to happen to get people to change the way they think. And now we're talking about the free will and opinion of 320 million Americans to change the way where they are not so greedy and self-centered that they just want their piece of the pie that the government's always given them or promised them, and that's not as trying to make the
Well,
country.
I think if they don't get some fear instilled in them, they're not going to change. If they don't understand where we're headed or what they're doing to their own kids and grandkids, that may be the emotional appeal. Are you willing to destroy this country for your kids and grandkids? Uh, I'm not, but I'm one person. I,
Right,
I have kids and grandkids, and I want them to have a country that the same country I grew up in.
right,
Uh, but it's not going to happen. Not if we keep going the way we're going.
right. With the same opportunity and everything else, and I think what some people miss is they mistake opportunity and abilities and rights afforded to them from stuff. Right? Some people are like, I want my kids and great to have everything I couldn't have, and they always think of like a big house and cars and this and this stuff, not the liberties that were given, right? Because like you said,
But they're going to actually do just the opposite.
yeah,
They will destroy this country for the kids and grandkids. I mean, it won't be recognizable if we can't sell our debt. There is no good answer at that point. I have a chapter in the Ponzi book where I wrote through a dystopian view of what I think will happen, chapter 6, and I say, here's the situation. We have 75 trillion of debt, which isn't so far off anymore, and we can't sell our bonds. And I go through the arithmetic. The only thing you can do when you get to that situation where you can't sell your bonds is you have to default on your debt, which is cataclysmic, or you print the money, which leads to hyperinflation and eventually collapse.
right.
Those are the two choices you would have.
So we see the cliff in front of us, and some people think that cliff's so far out they never have to worry about it. Others have no idea how fast we're rolling to that cliff.
That road is getting shorter and shorter every year.
Yeah,
And just recently, with some of the data that I've been watching, it made me worry if we weren't getting real close because there's some odd things going on with the numbers that tell me there's a loss of confidence starting to brew. Uh, and as Hemingway noted, how do you go bankrupt all of a sudden? And when we get to the crisis, it will be too late to solve the problem. If we don't address it now, we're not going to solve the problem. We're going to crash into the iceberg and sink,
when you
and
say
that scares me.
when you say address it now, what is your definition of now? Is that in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20?
Well, I've been thinking we have 5 to 10 years before we crash. Here lately, I've been wondering if we have that long. Have we already passed the point of no return? I mean, trying to reform entitlements, even if you had the willingness to do it, it's going to take a long time, and we're going to continue to have deficits. And I'm not even an advocate of a balanced budget. I'm just advocating a smaller deficit every year. If you grow the economy faster than the debt, the ratio of debt to the economy slowly gets better. So if we had a 1 or 2 or 3% deficit to the economy instead of 7%, we could start to get into much better shape. And if you have a smaller, more limited government, you grow the economy faster. That's the way economics works.
Right.
If you the more the government is the non-producing part of our economy, and the private sector is productive. They're the ones that create and innovate and bring. The bigger the private sector is, the faster you can grow the economy. So if you make government smaller, the private set part gets bigger and it grows faster. And the bigger we have government, that's why the European countries are struggling with growth. Their debt load is way worse than ours. They're 50% more taxes, and they're not taxing the rich. They've already exhausted that. They have to tax everybody
Right.
because there's not enough money in the rich to pay for all their programs. So the taxes on the middle class and lower class are very high in countries like Sweden. That's one that I've studied. Taxes are enormous, and they're very regressive taxes because a lot of it is like on gasoline or the value added tax on consumption on top of very high income and social program taxes. All of that adds up to a lot more than ours. So these people that say tax rich don't understand. The rich are already paying the lion's share of the taxes. The top 10% pay 75% of the income tax. The bottom 50% pays 2%. So we're already taxing the rich. If you want a lot more revenue in the government, you're going to have to tax the middle class and lower class a lot
Which,
more. And
uh,
that's not a good strategy.
well, where things like the fair tax or flat tax come in, right? Where a flat tax, if it's
Either I would love either one of those.
yeah, a flat tax being 5 or 8% across the board, right? Capital.
Yeah, it's a fixed number across the board with some significant deductions for the lower income people, so their tax burden is lower. It's a simple, easy to do. You get rid of all the cronyism and
Right.
corruption. Part of the reason the tax is so complicated is because of the corruption and the cronyism and the special favors that are built into it. What
Right.
would the lobbyists do?
Right. I mean, a lot of this stuff that's come about since the 20th, I mean, January 20th, all things that have come out, not just Doge, but we look at I think when I look at the cutting of funds to like, why is Harvard getting millions, if not billions a year from the federal government when they already, charge crazy tuition? And like, why is the government giving Harvard or Yale or any of these higher education for-profit institutions? Why is it the government giving them money? They charge $100,000 per student plus a whole bunch of fees on top of that. That would be money that could, the government doesn't pay out, right?
It's
It's
it's all borrowed money.
yeah,
It's all borrowed money until you balance the budget. Everything you spend is borrowed money. So if you think about it that way, Tom Sowell. I mean, I may be running over my time here, but Tom Sowell had a great quote about economics. He says, "The first rule in economics is scarcity. There's never enough to satisfy everybody's needs and wants. The first rule in politics is ignore the first rule of economics." I always thought that was a great quote, and
yeah,
that's true.
yeah, yeah. I guess exactly. I really like your example on stripping away all the zeros and breaking it down for an American family. That
It's in the pamphlet.
yeah, that
That example.
we're definitely gonna promote that. 9 pages is not too long. People could read it. I mean, if grassroots it, that's what we got to do. That's maybe the first step to get people educated because everyone can relate and understand when they look at their checkbook or look at their bank statements what it means to what those kind of numbers mean, and they quickly can realize Because, like you say, nobody can imagine what $130 trillion is, right? It's
It's
just
it's, it's unfathomable.
right.
I mean, who can think of what even $1 trillion is?
But you tell someone you make 44,000 a year and you have a $270,000 in credit card debt, they'd be like, "Wait, what?" Like, I'll never
And you spend 70,000 a year.
spend 70,000. Like, yeah, it's like that could maybe that's where it's got to take. But yeah, hey, we've had you on for almost an hour. I this has been great, Les. Is there anything we haven't? We talked about the book, we talked about the pamphlet. Make sure Rob's been running the website. Anything you'd like to share with our viewers or listeners, just that we haven't covered, that you'd like to let them know, or just anything future coming?
Just take it upon yourself to educate yourself about what's going on in this country, and then you'll be alarmed just as I am. If you don't understand and have some fear, you'll never express what you need to do, and then speak up, speak out. You've got to make your opinions known. We actually have on our website a contact Congress button. Makes it very easy. Just click on it and put in your name and address and send. That's all you have to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Les. Again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was very educational and informative. I know I've got a lot from it. I'm looking forward to checking out the pamphlet. But again, thank you so much for giving us your Thursday night.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Everyone, have a great night. Be sure and tune in, watch our shows here on Thursday and Tuesdays, and follow us on all of our socials. And be sure and check out all of our nonprofits we support and those that support us. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night. I don't know what Rob's doing. He's dropping the ball. Where you at, Rob?